What happens when the International Space Station retires in 2030? For the first time in 2 decades, humanity could face an orbit with no permanent Western outpost. But at least 4 next-generation stations are already racing to fill that void, including commercial platforms, national programs, and engineering approaches that could redefine life in orbit after ISS and Tiangong. The question is whether any of them will be ready in time. The International Space Station stands as the most ambitious experiment in global partnership off Earth. Built and operated by NASA, Roscosmos, the European Space Agency, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency, its foundation rests on the 1998 Intergovernmental Agreement, a legal framework that divides ownership, allocates responsibilities, and ensures that each partner retains control over its modules and crew contributions. This structure has enabled more than 2 decades of uninterrupted human presence in orbit, with each agency sharing not just the costs, but also the risks and rewards of life in microgravity. Scientific returns have set a demanding benchmark for any successor. The ISS has hosted over 2,000 experiments, ranging from protein crystal growth that led to new medicines to long-duration physiology studies that define the limits of human adaptation for Mars missions. Its labs have supported breakthroughs in materials, science, combustion, and Earth observation. The National Lab designation in 2016 opened doors for commercial research and private sector payloads. Operationally, the IS has proven that multinational crews can live and work together through rotating expeditions, using a patchwork of hardware from 5 continents. Yet even this achievement faces a hard limit. NASA's official transition plan calls for continued use through 2030, followed by a controlled re-entry. The deorbit scenario relies on up to 3 Russian Progress vehicles firing their thrusters in a coordinated sequence to lower the station's orbit and guide it toward a remote stretch of the South Pacific. This approach avoids the risks of uncontrolled decay, and the 2014 Partnership Amendment commits each agency to fund or support the safe disposal process. As the ISS approaches its final years, its legacy is not just scientific or technical. It sets a yardstick for international cooperation, operational reliability, and responsible end-of-life planning, standards that any new generation of stations will be measured against. China's approach to life in orbit stands apart from the International Space Station model of shared management and multinational crews. Tiangong, which means Heavenly Palace, is a fully operational 3-module station assembled between 2021 and 2022 by the China Manned Space Agency, known as CMSA. Its T-shaped structure, built from the Tianhe Core, Wentian, and Mengtian laboratory modules, hosts 3 astronauts for 6-month rotations and supports a steady cadence of cargo and resupply missions. Unlike the International Space Station, Tiangong is governed solely by Chinese authorities, with CMSA controlling operations, crew selection, and research priorities, making it an independent platform. Expansion is already underway. Official plans call for the addition of 3 more modules by the end of this decade, doubling internal volume and extending the station's service life to at least 2035. Upgrades include a new cargo docking node, a dedicated science bay with expanded experiment racks, and a multi-purpose extension that could support commercial or tourism activities. These upgrades rely on standardized interfaces and modular hardware, allowing China to scale up its orbital presence with each Long March 5B launch. Diplomatically, Tiangong signals a different kind of outreach. China has invited foreign scientists to propose experiments through the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, offering payload slots to researchers from countries including Germany, Brazil, South Africa, and the UAE. The first batch of international experiments is scheduled for delivery from 2025 to 2026. While the U.S. Wolf Amendment blocks direct cooperation between NASA and China, Tiangong's Foreign Access Program has created new lanes for scientific exchange outside the traditional International Space Station partnership system. This independent path, blending national control with selective collaboration, positions Tiangong as both a competitor and an alternative to the Western approach in low Earth orbit. Commercial space stations are no longer a distant concept. Axiom Station, Orbital Reef, and Starlab are racing to define the next era of living and working in orbit, each with its own vision and business logic. Axiom Space, led by former NASA managers and private investors, is following a phased approach. Its first habitat will dock to the International Space Station in 2025, serving as an extension for research and private missions. By 2028, this module will detach and operate independently as the core of a free-flying station. The plan calls for additional modules, each designed to support research, manufacturing, and eventually commercial visitors. Axiom's model relies on a mix of government contracts, private research, and high-value tourism, with NASA acting as an anchor customer through the Commercial Low Earth Orbit Destinations Program. Orbital Reef, a joint venture between Blue Origin and Sierra Space, is pitching itself as a mixed-use business park in orbit. Its open architecture design allows third-party labs, crew habitats, and even media studios to dock or detach as needed. The first modules are scheduled for launch in 2027, with a campus layout that can expand as new partners sign on. The customer base is deliberately broad. Research institutions, manufacturing startups, entertainment companies, and wealthy tourists all have a place on the reef. The modular hub-and-spoke model is meant to drive down costs and allow rapid adaptation to market demand, while NASA secures research and crew rotation slots through pre-negotiated agreements. Starlab, developed by Voyager Space and its partners, focuses on high-throughput science. Its initial module, launching in 2028, is purpose-built for microgravity research and industrial experiments. The station's design emphasizes reconfigurable payload bays and standardized interfaces, making it easy to swap out experiment racks or expand with additional modules. Starlab targets a steady flow of commercial research contracts, National Space Agency partnerships, and specialized missions for pharmaceutical and materials science companies. Each of these ventures is betting that a flexible, modular approach, combined with a diversified client mix, will be essential for survival in a market no longer dominated by government funding alone. Inflatable modules are changing the economics of space construction. Where rigid aluminum modules once dictated size and cost, new designs like Sierra Space's Habitats and NASA's Beam prototype compress for launch, then expand in orbit to offer 2 to 3 times more living space per kilogram. Bigelow's expandable activity module launched at just over a ton and expanded to 16 cubic meters, a leap in mass to volume efficiency that frees up cargo space for science and supplies. Starlab's core module aims for a 12-meter diameter, with shielding proven on the International Space Station, pushing the limits of safe, spacious habitats. Robotic assembly now drives orbital construction. NASA's OSA-M1 will test a fully autonomous robot, welding and outfitting modules without human spacewalks. This reduces the need for risky, time-consuming spacewalks and speeds up station assembly. Tiangong's robotic arm, inspired by Canadarm2, already moves modules and swaps payloads, showing how routine and scalable orbital building can become. Artificial gravity, once a theoretical fix for bone loss and muscle atrophy, is moving toward reality. ESA's centrifuge module spun test subjects at 4 revolutions per minute, achieving partial gravity without severe motion sickness. NASA's studies suggest a 2-meter radius centrifuge could slow bone loss, a key health risk for long missions. The first in-orbit demonstration is planned for 2028, with commercial stations designing spinning habitats for both research and private stays. Standardized interfaces, like the International Docking System Standard, let modules from different manufacturers connect seamlessly. These advances lower costs, reduce maintenance, and open orbital space to new players, while shifting the spotlight to the engineers whose innovations shape life above Earth. NASA no longer owns the platforms that will replace the International Space Station. Instead, the agency has adopted a customer model through the Commercial Low Earth Orbit Destinations program. Contracts are structured around milestone payments. Private station developers receive funding only when they hit specific technical and operational targets, such as module assembly or crew launch readiness. NASA's role as an anchor tenant guarantees a baseline of research and crew rotation business, but the agency does not pay for overruns or failed milestones. This risk transfer approach shifts much of the financial burden to private investors and incentivizes rapid progress. The logic is simple. NASA buys only what it needs, while companies build with an eye toward broader markets, science, manufacturing, tourism, and media. By tying payments to performance, the agency aims to foster a competitive ecosystem without assuming the full cost or risk of station development. Revenue models for next-generation space stations are built on a mix of research, manufacturing, tourism, and media. Microgravity. Manufacturing leads the way, especially in producing high-quality fiber optics. ZBLN fibers made in orbit can fetch up to 10 times the price of those produced on Earth, and the market for space-made materials is projected to exceed $100 million annually by 2030. Pharmaceutical and biotech firms are booking experiment slots, each costing upwards of $2 million. Tourism is growing too. Seats for private visitors on commercial stations have sold for $55 to $70 million. And Orbital Reef is planning up to 20 tourist stays per year. Media rights add another layer as live broadcasts and film projects command premium rates. Starlab's planned zero-gravity studio has attracted offers of $10 million per event. The economic promise is real, but each revenue stream depends on sustained demand and reliable access, making the future of orbital markets both dynamic and uncertain. Low Earth orbit is becoming a busier and riskier neighborhood. Since 2019, the number of tracked debris fragments has climbed past 30,000, with collision probability for large stations now exceeding 1 in 100 per year. Every new module, private or national, adds surface area vulnerable to impacts. Atmospheric drag, especially during solar maximum, forces operators to schedule frequent reboosts just to maintain altitude. These maneuvers require careful coordination and a steady supply of propellant, straining logistics and budgets. Program managers and insurers watch key milestones. Axiom's module docking in 2025, Orbital Reef's launch in 2027, and the International Space Station's targeted deorbit window in 2030. Each date is a checkpoint in a race against orbital decay and mounting debris, leaving the future of continuous human presence in orbit hanging on the calendar. Today, the future of human presence in orbit hinges on a delicate balance: commercial ambition, international cooperation, and policy resolve. As public and private visions compete and collide, the risks of fragmentation, political and technical, grow. What is at stake is not just science or industry, but who shapes humanity's next chapter overhead.